So you want to own a truck stop. And on paper, this is one of the best small businesses in America. Let's walk through why. Because the numbers are genuinely seriously good. Start with the customer. On any given day, somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million Class 8 trucks, full tractor trailers, are operating in the United States. At any single moment, 200,000 to 400,000 of them are physically rolling on public highways. Every one of those drivers is on a federally mandated clock. Every one of them, by law, has to stop. Your customer is not optional. Your customer is required. Now the supply side, which is where this starts to look unfair. There are roughly 5,000 truck stops in the entire country. 5,000 against a couple million trucks a day. The U.S. truck stop and travel center industry does more than $100 billion a year. Divide that across 5,000 locations, and the arithmetic gives you an average of $20 million a year per site. That average is badly skewed by the giant travel plazas at the top. A small independent pulls under $600,000 a year, while a large site clears well over $1 million, but sit with the shape of it anyway. 5,000 businesses splitting $100 billion. Then look at what one driver spends once he's actually on your property, because this is the part that sells the dream. Food and drink alone, $25 to $35 a day, every day, $750 to over $1,000 a month. One meal at a truck stop runs $10 to $15. The average driver spends over $600 a year on coffee. A shower is $12 to $15. Overnight parking runs $10 to $20 a night. A convenience store overall turns a 5 to 7% profit margin. But snacks and beverages, the exact things a driver grabs on his way to the register, carry 40 to 50%. Sit with that. You'd be selling coffee and sandwiches at nearly 50 points to an audience that is legally required to be standing in your building. And then there's the number that makes this stop looking like a business and start looking like a loophole. The most recent nationwide inventory found roughly 313,000 legal truck parking spaces in the entire United States. About 40,000 of those are at public rest areas. The other 273,000, the overwhelming majority, sit at private truck stops. Set that against demand, and the Department of Transportation puts it at roughly one legal parking space for every 11 drivers. One space. 11 drivers. 7 out of 10 drivers admit to parking illegally just to find somewhere to stop. So add it up the way it adds up in your head. A customer base of millions of people who are legally obligated to stop driving. Only 5,000 places in the entire country where they can do it. A permanent, structural, nationwide shortage of the single thing they need most. 40 to 50% margins on everything they buy while they're there. Revenue that shows up 7 days a week at 3 in the morning in a snowstorm on Christmas, because freight doesn't stop moving just because the economy got worse. And a moat nobody can cross. No competitor on earth can undercut you on a service whose entire value is being located exactly where you are. Amazon can't ship a parking space. Nobody can outsource a shower. In your head, this isn't a good business. In your head, this is a perfect business. So how does it actually work? What does it really cost to get in the door? What does the money look like from the inside once you own it? And where exactly does this thing go wrong? Let's find out. You're 30 years old. You've been married 14 months. And you have wanted this since you were 22, because 22 is when you started driving. Company driver at 22. Owner-operator at 26. You know I-40 the way other people know their own street. And the reason you want this business, specifically, and not any of the other businesses a person could want, is that you have personally been the demand side of that 1 in 11 statistic for 400 nights of your life. You've slept on off-ramps. You've slept in the breakdown lane. You've been woken at 3 a.m. by a state trooper with a flashlight and taken the ticket without arguing because the alternative was driving on no sleep. You don't need a market study. You've been the market study. So you look up what it costs to build 10 to 25 acres of land. A compact build with basic fueling and a small store, $6 to $12 million. Major operators typically spend $10 to $15 million on a new location, and a full travel center runs past 25. Construction alone is $220 to $420 a square foot, before the fuel systems, which are their own line item entirely. About 2 years from dirt to open. You have $96,000 and a truck with 190,000 miles on it. Your neighbor Bob is power washing his driveway when you get home. Bob does commercial HVAC and has never once in his life said, "I don't know." You tell him. Bob says, "You know what a truck stop is? It's a gas station for people who can't afford a hotel." Then he laughs and says the thing you'll remember for 18 years. Stick to driving, man. That's your lane. Here's what saves you, and it's grim. 2009 is the worst year the freight industry has had in decades, and you are shopping. You can't build. Nobody can build in 2009. But people who bought at the top are being forced to sell at the bottom, and in March you find one. It's off a state route about a mile from an interstate exit in the wrong direction, which is exactly why it's cheap. 7 acres, 2 diesel lanes, and 4 gas dispensers. 22 parking spaces on gravel that turns to soup when it rains. 2 showers, one of which hasn't worked since the previous administration. A restaurant space, dark, with the chairs still stacked. Under $600,000 a year in revenue, which puts it firmly in the bottom tier of this industry. The owner wanted $1.6 million in 2007. He'll take $1,150,000 now, land included, because his lender is done being patient. You go to a bank in a year when banks are not lending to anyone, for a category of property lenders like leased. Truck stops are special purpose real estate. If the business fails, that fuel canopy and those underground tanks cannot become anything else. The collateral has exactly one use. So where a standard SBA business acquisition asks 10% down, special purpose properties like fuel sites typically get asked for 15 to 20. On $1.15 million, 20% is $230,000. You have 96. And then the second problem, which is the one that actually ends it. The SBA sets no minimum credit score. The lenders do. And most want a personal FICO north of 650 to 680. You're at 604 because you're an owner-operator who ate a catastrophic 2008. 2 brokers stiffed you inside 4 months, you carried the truck payment on credit cards, and your file has never recovered. The seller, who is desperate, agrees to carry $74,000 on a standby note. Now you need $60,000 more, and you have 11 days. You tell Bob over the fence, not asking, just talking. And Bob, who told you to stick to your lane, says he'll write the check for $60,000. Then he tells you the price. 10%, not annually. 10% a month. $6,000 every month until the 60 comes back. A bank at the rate you couldn't get would have been around 11% a year. Bob's is roughly 10 times that, and he quotes it in the flat, reasonable voice of a man reading a parts catalog, and then he says, "I'm betting on you here. You take it." You close in April 2009. You are 31 years old. You own 7 acres, 22 gravel parking spaces, and 1 working shower. You owe your neighbor $6,000 a month. You spend your first full year learning the thing that reorganizes everything you thought you knew. Revenue is $2.1 million, and roughly 78% of that is diesel going through 2 lanes. Your first instinct, the driver's instinct, is that this is great because diesel is the business. Diesel is not the business. Fuel margins at a truck stop run somewhere between 1 and 5%. 1 to 5. You are moving millions of dollars of product to keep single-digit pennies on the dollar, and you're financing that inventory, and you're absorbing the card fees on it. Meanwhile, and this is the sentence the whole industry runs on, non-fuel sales are about 40% of a healthy travel center's revenue and about 60% of its profit. Now go look at your own numbers. Your non-fuel is 22% of revenue. You have a store the size of a living room, 1 working shower, a gravel lot, and a dark restaurant. You didn't buy an underperforming truck stop. You bought a fuel business with a truck stop's costs attached, and you've been congratulating yourself on the part that doesn't pay. There's a second thing you learn, and it's the one drivers never see. The fleets don't pay your posted price. They pay with fuel cards, Comdata, EFS, and the rest, against discount and rebate arrangements negotiated between networks, fleets, and chains. You are a small independent with no volume, which means you have almost no leverage over the terms, and every one of those transactions carries a fee. The price on your sign is theater for the people it doesn't apply to. You work 90 hours a week. You pump, you cashier, you plow, you unclog. When your night guy quits in August, you cover nights for 6 weeks and sleep in the office on a cot, which is genuinely funny given that you got into this because of where truckers have to sleep. Take home for the year, $22,000. $6,000 of every month's profit walks across the street to Bob. Your wife is a dental hygienist and is at this point the only reliable income in your household. She does not complain, which you find harder to sit with than complaining. Bob, from his driveway, watching you get home at 8 a.m. How's the empire? You pay Bob off in month 14. Principal, $60,000. Interest paid, $84,000. $144,000 total on a 14-month loan. The bank you couldn't qualify for would have charged you somewhere around $4,000. You hand him the last check in his driveway. He folds it into his shirt pocket and says, "Good. That was starting to keep me up at night." You do not respond to that. Your son is born in June 2011. You are at the hospital 11 hours and back at the store that night because your fuel delivery comes at 4 a.m. and nobody else can sign for it. You will think about this specific night for a long time. It's not a tragedy. It's just the first clear look at what the arrangement actually is. And 2012 is the year you stop trying to win at Diesel. You take the money you were sending Bob and you put it into the parts of the property that were never about fuel at all. You gut and rebuild both showers properly with real ventilation and good water pressure and a lock that works, and you charge $14 waived with a 50-gallon fill. You put in a laundry with 4 machines. You build out a real driver's lounge with functioning outlets, which sounds trivial and is not. Non-fuel goes from 22% of revenue to 29%. Total revenue barely moves, $2.2 million, but take-home goes to $88,000 because you finally started selling the profitable things. Hours 84, which is not an improvement any normal person would recognize as one. This is the year you finally act on the napkin from Amarillo. You pave the lot, not a patch, the whole thing. Grading, drainage, asphalt, lighting on poles, cameras, striping, a second entrance so a driver isn't backing onto a state route. 22 spaces of gravel become 58 paved, lit, monitored spaces. It costs $610,000, financed against the land, and it is unambiguously the best decision of your life. Because a truck parking space, once it exists, costs almost nothing to operate. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't need a supplier. It doesn't get shoplifted. You are selling the one thing in your entire business that has a structural nationwide shortage. 1 legal space per 11 drivers, and your only real input cost was asphalt, 1 time. You charge $18 for a reserved guaranteed space. Free unreserved parking stays, because free parking is how you get the driver onto the property in the first place. And once he's on the property, he showers, he eats, he buys, he does laundry. Reserved is for the driver who is 50 miles out at 9 p.m. and wants to stop wondering. That driver will pay $18 without blinking, and he'd pay more, and you both know it. You also stop trying to run a restaurant yourself. You lease the dark restaurant space to a regional chicken franchisee. You are now collecting rent, which is the first genuinely passive dollar you have earned in 6 years. Revenue, $2.9 million. Non-fuel share, 34%. Take home, $147,000. Your son is 3. You make it to things now, sometimes. The bank that turned you down in 2009 calls you in 2016. 7 years of returns, a paved and producing asset, and a lender's favorite thing on earth, which is boring consistency. You buy a second site, 11 acres, a better exit, in worse condition, for $1.9 million, and you do to it in 18 months what took you 5 years the first time, because now you know the order of operations. Pave first, shower second, fuel last. Easier. And harder. Harder because everything that worked at location 1 worked because you were standing in it. You hire a real general manager at $72,000 a year and spend a genuinely humbling stretch discovering that you are an excellent operator and a mediocre boss, and that those are unrelated skills. Your first GM lasts 9 months. The second one is still with you in 2026. Your hours go up before they go down, 82 a week through most of 2017, because you're now running one and teaching another. Then on December 18th, 2017, the electronic logging device mandate's compliance deadline hits and paper logs end. Hours of service stop being negotiable. A driver can no longer stretch the last hour to reach a better stop. The clock is the clock, and when it's out, he stops wherever he is. Overnight, demand for legal, predictable, reservable parking becomes less flexible and more desperate. You own 130 paved spaces across 2 properties. Combined revenue, $5.4 million. Take home, $310,000. Bob, seeing the second property sign on your truck. 2 of them now. Hope the economy holds up for ya. Somewhere between the second site and the 5th, the business changes species. It stops being a job you own and becomes an organization you run. 5 general managers. An operations director at $115,000 who handles what used to be your 4A. M. Phone calls. A controller. Enough combined fuel volume that your supply terms finally improve and someone returns your call the same day. Your hours, 50 a week. Set that against 90 in 2010. That's the curve this entire video is actually about. Not the money curve, the hours curve. Income rose the whole way through, more or less smoothly. Hours peaked in year 1 and did not meaningfully break until you had 5 locations and a management layer under you. 11 years sat under the top of that arc, and they were the 11 years your kid was 0 to 10. Revenue across 5, $14.2 million. Take home $740,000. You are by any measure applied from outside wealthy. You have 410 paved parking spaces in a country with 1 legal space per 11 drivers. Everything above is what the genre usually shows you. Here's the part it usually doesn't. Remember the thing you believed at 30. That freight doesn't stop moving just because the economy got worse. That was the most expensive assumption of your life, because the thing about a business whose customer is freight is that you are a leverage bet on other people's shipping volumes, and you do not get a vote. 2023 is a freight recession. Rates collapse, volumes fall. The carriers who expanded into the 2021 boom are holding trucks and payments they can't cover, and small fleets and owner-operators, the exact people who fill your lot, start leaving the industry. On July 30th, 2023, Yellow Corporation ceases operations. 99 years old, third largest less-than-truckload carrier in the country, 30,000 people out of work in a weekend. Its shipments had fallen 13% year over year in the first quarter. Its exit removes roughly 10% of LTL capacity from the market. Yellow was a terminal-to-terminal LTL carrier, so its drivers were never really your overnight customer. That's not the point. The point is what it signals. When a 99-year-old carrier of that size can be gone by Sunday, the freight economy underneath your 5 properties is not a stable thing you can plan against. Your diesel volume drops. Your paid parking occupancy drops because a driver who isn't hauling doesn't need a space, and a driver whose rate per mile just fell 20% starts choosing the free lot over the $18 one. And now you find out what the fine print was for. Your debt service across 5 properties does not move. Property taxes do not move. Insurance goes up. Because insurance always goes up, your GMs still get paid. The asphalt you were so proud of still has to be lit, plowed, patrolled, and repaved on a schedule whether there's a truck on it or not. Every fixed cost keeps taking the same bite out of a number that shrank underneath it. Take-home falls to $395,000 across 5 locations, less than you made on 2 in 2017. You do not open a 6th that year. You let 2 GM positions consolidate. You have, for the first time since 2012, a genuinely bad conversation with a lender. And if you want the reminder of how ugly this industry's incentives get under pressure, it already happened. And it happened at the top. In April 2013, the FBI and IRS raided Pilot Flying J's headquarters in Knoxville. The scheme had been running since at least 2007. The company was shorting its own trucking customers on promised diesel rebates and off-invoice discounts, deliberately reducing what it owed targeted fleets, then fabricating the backup documentation sent to them. Employees emailed each other spreadsheets tracking the fraudulent reductions. Pilot admitted to defrauding customers of more than $56 million. It paid a $92 million criminal penalty, on top of an $85 million civil settlement, repaying roughly 5,500 trucking companies with interest. 10 employees pleaded guilty. The company's former president, Mark Hazelwood, was convicted of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud plus witness tampering and sentenced to more than 12 years in prison and a $750,000 fine. The victims were small fleets, people who fill lots like yours. The mechanism was the discount layer, the same opaque negotiated layer you've been on the wrong side of since 2010, and the largest operator in the country ran a fraud through it for 6 years. That's the industry you're leveraged into. You sell in 2026, at 48, to a regional operator who wants your footprint and your dirt. 6 locations, roughly $2.2 million in annual EBITDA coming out of the downturn. And the thing that matters more than any of it, you own the land under all 6. That's what you're actually selling. Independent fuel and convenience businesses without real estate trade at roughly 3 to 5 times earnings. Add the real estate, and it's a different transaction entirely, closer to 8 times, because the buyer is buying acreage on interstate exits with fuel infrastructure and permitted underground tanks already in the ground, and land does not have a fuel margin. Gross $18.6 million. Then reality applies itself. $6.4 million in outstanding debt. Broker and legal fees. Environmental assessment on 6 fuel sites, which is not a formality when there are tanks under all of them and one of yours needs remediation. Then taxes. You walk away with about $8.1 million. 18 years. 30 to 48. Bob is 71 and retired. Bob comes over with a beer to look at the boat, and Bob says completely sincerely, which is the remarkable part, "I always believed in you." He says it in the same driveway where he told you to stick to your lane, and where he charged you 10% a month. You say, "Thanks, Bob." That's a good outcome. You should hear all the ways it isn't the normal one. You never made money on fuel, and you never were going to. Diesel margins run 1 to 5%. You spent 18 years operating a business where the product in the biggest letters on the sign, the product that occupies most of your revenue and all of your working capital, was functionally a loss leader to get a truck onto your asphalt. Non-fuel is 40% of revenue and 60% of profit at a healthy travel center. And the operators who never internalize that spend a career grinding on the wrong side of the split. The asphalt made you rich, and so did the dirt. Not the brand, not the diesel, not the store. A one-time $610,000 paving job in 2014 that sold a nationally scarce good with almost no marginal cost. And 6 parcels of interstate adjacent land you were stubborn enough to own instead of lease. Strip the real estate out of that final number, and the same business sells for a fraction of it. Most people who buy one truck stop own one truck stop forever. The arc you just watched is being described because it's watchable, not because it's typical. Small independents in that under $600,000 a year tier mostly stay there. Undercapitalized, unable to fund the paving or the showers or the second entrance that would change the economics, competing against chains whose fuel buying power they can't approach. You were always a leverage bet on somebody else's freight volumes. 2023 proved it. Your costs were fixed and your revenue wasn't, and nothing you did well operationally had any effect on whether trucking rates held. 11 of your 18 years were spent at 80-plus hours a week for that privilege, and the biggest player in the industry got caught defrauding your customers for 6 years. 92 million criminal, 85 million civil, a president in federal prison for over 12 years. That's the competitive environment, not an aberration in it. So what did 18 years actually buy? Not a fuel business. You bought 7 acres in 2009 because it was the only door open to you in the worst year the industry had. And then you spent 18 years slowly figuring out that the valuable thing on the property was never in the tanks. It was the ground and the light poles and 58 rectangles of paint. You didn't get rich selling diesel to truckers. You got rich solving the problem you had at 30, a place to stop, and charging $18 for it, 410 times a night. That was one man's arc, and it started in 2009, in the worst year the industry had, at a price that only existed because somebody's lender ran out of patience. You are not buying in 2009. So here is what the door actually costs today, what you would actually make, and who this business is actually good for. First, what one costs. The median asking price for an established truck stop on the open market is $712,500. The range runs from under $325,000 to well over $1.375 million. But the asking price is not the number that matters, because you cannot walk in with the down payment alone. Fuel sites are special purpose collateral, so an SBA loan asks 15 to 20% down instead of the standard 10. Then a Phase 1 environmental assessment, and a Phase 2, because there are tanks under that dirt and no lender closes without knowing what is in the soil. Then legal, title, the guarantee fee. Then working capital, which is the part that kills people because a load of diesel is bought before it is sold. Call it $325,000 to $450,000 in cash to own a $700,000 truck stop. Now the part you came for. How much do you actually make? There are 3 tiers, and they are completely different businesses. Tier 1, the small independent. $500,000 to $750,000 to buy. These trade at 3 to 5 times owner's earnings, so it throws off roughly $150,000 to $235,000 a year. Subtract the note, $600,000 financed at today's rates is about $74,000 a year in debt service, and you are left with $100,000 to $160,000. Now say the quiet part. That is not profit. That is your salary. You are working 70 to 90 hours a week, and if you hired a competent site manager to do what you are doing, you would pay them $65,000 or $75,000 of it. Strip that out, and the business as a business cleared about $30,000. Tier 2, the real interstate site. 3 to 5 million to buy. Actual listings at this level move 110,000 gallons and $130,000 of inside sales a month. Earnings land somewhere around $600,000 to $1.1 million a year. Debt service on 4 million is roughly $460,000. So you clear $150,000 to $600,000, but you need close to $1 million in cash to get in the door. And you are now an employer, not an operator. Tier 3, the plaza. Cash flow above $2 million a year, priced accordingly at 9 to 15 million. That is not a business you buy. That is a business you build into, the way he did, over 18 years. And here is the honest headline for Tier 1, which is where almost everybody actually starts. You will make somewhere around $100,000 a year for 80 hours a week in year 3 or 4. Year 1 will be worse than the spreadsheet because the seller's earnings figure is built on add backs that flatter him, and something on that property is deferred: the canopy, the dispensers, the showers, or the tanks. A failed tank test is not a repair bill. It is a remediation project, and it runs into 6 figures. The real money is not the paycheck. It is that truck drivers spend 25 years paying off a mortgage on interstate adjacent acreage with your name on it, and a business sold with its real estate trades at 4 to 7 times earnings instead of 3 to 5. The equity build is the return. The paycheck is what you live on while it happens. So who is this a good business for? It is good for the person who already knows this customer. The driver, the dispatcher, the fleet guy. He bought 7 acres because he had spent his life on the wrong side of that counter and knew exactly what was missing from it. It is good for the person who wants a land-backed asset and is willing to work 80 hours to own it. This is real estate with a hard job attached. And if you want the dirt, the job is the price. It is good for the value-add buyer. The tired site with dead showers, gravel parking, and a dark restaurant is the whole opportunity, because fuel margin is 1 to 5%, while inside sales are 40% of revenue and 60% of profit. Everything you fix is on the profitable side of that split, and it is a bad business for 4 people. Anyone who wants passive income. There is no version of this that is passive, not one. Anyone leasing the ground. If you do not own the dirt under those tanks, you are renting a low-margin fuel job, and you will never own the thing that appreciates. Anyone with no reserve past the closing. Not the down payment, the tank money. And anyone whose thesis is gallons pumped. If fuel volume is what sold you, you have misunderstood the business you are buying. And this entire story just showed you why. Get those right, and this is a genuinely good business. Hard, unglamorous, land-backed, and real. Get one of them wrong, and you have bought yourself the 80-hour job without the $8 million ending.